thank you all for being here. When preparing, I didn't take into account my 8-year-old sitting in the room. So, I'm going to have to dial back my normal shtick, I think. But give me an idea of why you showed up this morning. What do you hope to get out of it? Not all at once.
Yeah. Hindsight's always 20/20.
Okay, hindsight is 20/20. But what does that mean?
We have the wisdom now and the experience, clarity, and to pass that on to our kids.
Okay.
I would like to know what things I need to be looking out for as a parent so that I can support my kid through these years.
Okay.
I would say what happens if you were to test positive on the August drug test, or if you were to find a vape or some sort of drug item on your kid, what do I do now?
What to do when?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes? Oh my? Okay. All right, well, so my undergrad is in pastoral ministries. I thought I was going to be youth pastor. Then I went to seminary to do an MDiv. 80 hours into that, God goes, hey, I think I want you to be a counselor and a therapist because you're really good at asking questions and not so good at Greek. So that wasn't a hard sell. Many of the other things that God has sold me on, that one wasn't. So at any time, raise your hand, ask questions. If you need to say amen or oh me, please do. I want this to be more of a dialogue than anything else, because I think that that's helpful. That's really distracting, by the way. So I have to look at the coffee. Not that.
That's why we set up this way.
Yeah, I know. So as Joey introduced, so I've been a licensed professional counselor for almost 15 years now. Most of that time has been working with inpatient residential substance abuse treatment. So first 6 years was with adults. And I'm sitting in a group of 8 or 10, 30, 40, 50-year-olds doing therapy. And John raises a hand, and we start talking about John's stuff. And I say, John, when did that happen? He goes, when I was 14. And then Mike raises his hand. Oh, yeah, it happened to me when I was 16. And then Billy said, oh, that was me when I was 12. And this entrepreneurial seizure happens with me. And I go, why not help these kids, these 40, 50-year-old kids in my group, when they were actually 12, right? And so that's why Clearfork exists, is to really try to address some of these things now so they don't expound. Because I had guys who owned golf courses, I had guys who owned airplanes, and really successful dudes in my group, but holding on to childhood trauma stuff, okay? All right, so I'm going to take for a theme today. I don't know if there's any older people in the room who know, right? Okay, my Boston guy over here, right? Knows hockey. I want to take for a theme today, and it's kind of what you said a little bit. It said, Wayne Gretzky's, this phrase has been used forever, but he says, skate to where the puck will be, not where it has been, right? And so that's kind of the phrase that made him the player that he was, because he could see and know where things are going, right? So as parents, it's kind of too late when we get the drug test back. It's kind of late when we end up in the ER. It's kind of late when we come home with cuts on our legs and self-harm kind of things, right? There's a lot of signs and things that are what the defense is presenting us or what the offensive scheme is, till we know where the puck is going to be. Okay, so I want to use that kind of as our theme as we talk today. And I think, Sarah, you said it. What's the number one thing I wish I knew? Right? What to look for. Okay? As all parents, we've always, whatever, right? Pick an illness. Oh, I wish I would have known that, right? I'm going to use my middle daughter. I would talk about her if she wasn't in the room, right? But she's going blind. Right? She has, mom and dad both have terrible eyes. When my son got his glasses, we didn't know what to look for. We didn't have a clue, right? Just all of a sudden, we homeschool, so there's not a back of the room. Everything's at the front of the room. And so he starts saying, hey, I can't see the ball, Dad. What do you mean you can't see the ball? Right? No, I can't see the ball when it comes off the pitcher's hand to hit you, right? So we knew what to look for when Micah said, hey, Dad, I can't see. Well, Here's Tyler's old glasses. Try these on. Oh, I can see, right? So we have things like that as parents all day long, every day. Once we've been through it, we know it, right? And so number one thing I wish I knew is just what to look for. Okay, we're going to smash together mental health and substance abuse because this is kind of the world that I live in, and we call it like comorbidity, right, or dual diagnosis, right? So we have mental health and then we have substance use. So everybody familiar with those two terms? Okay, mental health, right? You know, that's psychological, emotional well-being, and then substance abuse is just overindulgence or overuse, and there's 12 criteria that we look at to sort of diagnose and set in sort of time and place of where those things are. So co-occurring is when two of those disorders happen at the same time, okay? And the reason why I'm kind of smashing them together is because it's the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, how many kids have come home in the last year and said, I'm anxious? All of them, okay, right? It may be a test, it may be a game, it may be a relationship, you name it, right? How many have come home and said, I'm depressed? Right? How many have come home and said, I don't want to live anymore? Okay? These two things, mental health and substance use, can be the chicken or the egg, and that's what I always try to look at when I have my kiddos in treatment is which one am I really dealing with? Okay, is the substance use causing anxiety? Because we know marijuana is not the marijuana 40 years ago, right? It doesn't just chill you out and you eat Cheetos. It makes you super anxious after you use. And some kids end up in the hospital, and some, so like the effects are secondary and tertiary now with just marijuana. And then on the other hand, depression, anxiety, I'm going to say, depression and anxiety are at those inorganic things. Some of them are organic, but when I say they're inorganic, they're outside forces coming in. We have a natural anxiety, right? I'm speaking, there's a little bit of pulse going on. There's some good stuff happening to help my voice project and get my point across, but that external stuff becomes negative. And then they lean to maybe phones, maybe sex, maybe drugs, maybe cutting, maybe, right, other things. So we're going to mix and match these things together. In the next few slides, I'm going to give you some data, hopefully to overwhelm you. You're all in the room. To overwhelm you to tell your friends so that Joey has like 100 people in here and he has to like do it out there next time, So the comorbidity part is when they work together. They're working in and off of one another, right? So 8.5 million people have been diagnosed with a co-occurring mental health, right? That's just not one thing or the other, it's both and, right? So think about how many people just have a mental health diagnosis, right? Just depression and anxiety, and they go to their doc, and their doc writes, F code on their little sheet, and you go to Walgreens and get a prescription for that or something. Or all the folks that are just drinking vodka in the gallon form every day, right? Some of you nodded your head like you have seen or experienced that, okay? So empathize. Okay, how many of those folks do you think actually get treatment? The comorbid, dual diagnosis folks, what percent?
10, probably most of us.
I heard 25, I heard 10, I heard
2.
Okay.
Small.
Yeah, it's 8.3, right? The closest we can tell is somewhere around 8.3. And that leaves about 7.7 million psychos out there going untreated, right? And so we know the pervasiveness of this. And I'll take a little side road over here because Joey and I had a conversation about the book Good Therapy or Bad Therapy. Bad Therapy, right? People like me will diagnose anything, right? Because that's what we do. You go to the podiatrist and you say, my foot hurts. Well, he's got a code or a billing code or something to tell you what's wrong with your foot, right? And so as the realm of psychology has grown, so have these numbers. I want you to take them both in consideration because I'm going to wrap up with kind of it's okay message, right? Not all the doom and gloom stuff. So take that in consideration. 8.3% of people are getting help. I don't know, how's our school? What would that number be in our school of our kiddos who have a depression or anxiety and we just don't know, and they're secretly walking through our halls, putting on the smiley face, going to the games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, not to paint a bad picture, but the guys who sat in my adult treatment, a lot of them went to private schools. A lot of them went to Christian schools. A lot of them, started here, okay? Mental health, okay? So serious mental illness. And this is where I want to kind of deviate between I have a little bit of anxiety and what is a serious mental illness, okay? Two totally different things. Like I told you earlier, we're built and designed with a parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, okay? One drives us to have anxiety, one calms us down so we can go to sleep. Those are normal things, okay? And as parents, what we need to know and discern, what I wish I knew, what is something that needs to be addressed, and what is something that I need to tell them to go outside and play in the dirt. Okay, does that make sense? Because not everybody needs to go to therapy. Just going to say it, right? Like, they need to put their phone down, they need to stop eating sugar, and they need to go outside. That will solve a lot of our things when we start talking about what is a serious mental illness and what is just rich white people commonalities. Can I be that real, Joey?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when you get to me, it's way beyond that, right? When you get to me and my treatment, I was just marveled. I sat here a minute ago with Jennifer and Sarah and just marveled at the teenagers who were not trying to hang themselves sitting out here in this area, right? They're not jumping on tables. They're not fighting each other. They're wearing their clothes. It feels normal, okay? So when you get to me and you get to my center, it's abnormal, okay? And so we have to be able to sort of address and allow for the biological things to happen, the depression and anxiety, and push through those things versus, okay, what is serious mental illness? And it's defined by someone over 18, right? And so that's a key, like really serious, pervasive mental illness. I don't want to address in a 9-year-old, right? I don't want to address in a 13 or 14 or 15. Like, I have to get paid, but I don't want that on a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old, okay? So within the last year, a diagnosable mental behavior emotional disorder that causes serious functional impairment substantially interferes or limits one or more major activities in life. Okay? What are major activities in life?
Going to school.
Going to school. What else?
Functioning in society.
Eating, sleeping. What do you mean functioning in society? What do teenagers
Family,
do?
socializing.
Going to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay? What else?
Being able to participate in your hobbies.
Okay? Playing the tuba. Whatever. That's not tuba. Okay? Right. So what is the difference between, screw you, Mom, I'm busy, I don't want to go, I've got anxiety, and I literally can't get out of bed because I have something going on. Right, I've got a biological systemic issue, right, that's preventing me, right? And again, we'll looking at the chicken or the egg in this thing helps us understand kind of the difference between the two. Okay, questions so far? Everybody familiar with mental health disorders? Kind of understand kind of where we're going? All right, substance use. Sorry. Okay. We already got that. Okay. Substance use. How do we know it's a thing? How do we know it's a phase? How do we know when to kind of pull the fire alarm? Okay. We look at 11 or 12 criteria in the DSM. So the DSM is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Disorders. There's been 5 iterations now. The first one my professor 20 years ago said he memorized it all. Now it's like this big. So going back to my first comment, right? Like we like to diagnose things. We like to put names and numbers to things so we can get paid. But now it's like this big, right? And so, yeah, we'll pass that thought.
Do you feel like it's a trend or like?
Yes.
It seems to me like it's something that people feel like they need to be diagnosed with something. And how do you get past that? Like with a kid who's being told all their friends have these diagnoses, and you're like, that's not you. Like it's a.
And that.
I don't know. how to
If I
explain.
had a soapbox, that would be it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Bec-
And you don't want to undermine, like I keep saying, well, I'm not saying you can't, other people don't have problems or issues, but that doesn't mean that you also have problems and issues.
Correct. And it's a need to fit in, it's a need to identify, and it's a need to follow the herd, and all of those things. And it's contagious.
Yeah.
It's very
And it's like,
contagious.
How do you stop that? Like, how do you move them in a different direction?
We'll get to that in the second
Okay.
half, I hope.
Okay.
And at the core of it, it's kind of what Joey opened up with, right? It's knowing who Christ is and who he is in you,
Yeah,
and what he's called you to.
right.
Because we all have in us the ability to experience emotion. And if that, and I don't see anywhere in Scripture to where emotion unravels a human.
Right,
Right? We see demonic oppression.
right.
And I didn't bring that in here, but I've seen that in my practice. I've literally laid hands on someone, prayed for them, and they go, "Oh my God, I don't want to kill myself anymore."
Right.
Right? So there's that part of it.
Yeah.
What I wish I knew
Right.
was the difference between what is a diagnosable disorder and a demon.
And prime example where you're saying like the book was this big and now it's this big. Like, are we not telling people they have problems now that they might not necessarily had 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Or are they more problems? I don't know.
Yeah, we just have a name for them now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's the essence of the DSM-4 is like, so if I'm a clinician and I want to transfer a patient to another clinician, I can just give them this 3 or 4 or 5 digit code, and they know the associated symptoms that go along with that.
Okay,
That also helps everybody get paid,
right.
right? If you're billing insurance and you have to, like, it's just the same way you
Right.
go get a
Doctor,
doctor or whatever, there's a billing code for that. So, great question. Okay, so our criteria for substance use, okay? Are they using, we'll just start there, right? Are they using, okay? Because I'm assuming our crowd here isn't the same crowd as public schools, right? So it's a different message. So, but the criteria is going to be the same. Are they using for longer periods and more than they want, right? So real substance abuse use criteria. We want no use, right? But we look at this in terms of mild, moderate, or severe. There's 12 criteria. So if you meet 3, that's mild. You meet 6, that's moderate. You meet all or 10 or more, it's pretty severe, right? Are they giving up activities that we talked about? Are they not paying attention to consequences? Again, right? I don't care if I miss my baseball game, right? I know I can go pitch for Texas Tech, but I'd rather smoke and drink, okay? Not adhering to paying attention to the consequences don't mean anything to them anymore, right? So those are kind of the 3 big that I'm going to look for is interpersonal relationships, consequences, and then just that pervasive need to go and get and consume and look for and obtain substances, right? Questions with that?
What was the third one? You said relationships, like lack of relationships or don't care about the relationships. Consequences don't matter.
Yeah.
What was the?
Just a pervasive kind of desire, a craving.
Gotcha.
I'm always looking, right? Like
Yeah.
who's got pills in their pocket at school? Whose parents are out of town with the open
Yeah.
liquor cabinet?
Yeah.
You know, where can I get stuff
Yeah.
to alter my being?
Gotcha. Almost manic about pursuit.
Yeah, it's always in the back of your head. It's always there. When can I go get a drink? When can I go get high? Who are we going to go get high with? Where's the party?
Yeah.
Do you put addiction to media, social media, or digital, anywhere in here? Or is that just a totally different?
So I almost did a whole section in that. Yes, I think it's probably killing our kids more than anything, right? At least their brains and their ability to be creative and their ability to listen to you as a mom, their ability to engage with their peers, their ability, like just fill in the blank. This thing is killing us, right? And I say us because I'm just as guilty because I sit at the dinner table with my 3 kids and my beautiful wife, and guess what I do? Right? And that's why we have a rule: no phones at the table, right? Like we have screen time identified. We have sort of boundaries and expectations for those sort of things. And so I could do this whole thing on media and social media and technology. I know folks who've opened treatment centers just like mine, just for technology. I mean, I've heard stories of impacted colons because kids are playing video games and won't leave their room. Like literally putting their bed up against their door saying curse words to their mom because she's interrupting their raid or something like that. That's where this is at a very high level. But again, it starts with this, and it starts with us modeling, being able to shape those behaviors. And so we'll talk about that. We'll finish with that. It all kind of ends up with us, right?
On that point, I did the last one, and that was on social media and kind of tie in the screen time. The advice basically that I've given to parents is that 8 to 10 hours of sleep, an hour of physical activity a day, less than 2 hours recreationally on screens, like that the less than 2 hours deal gives the kid reality to anchor to. Whereas whenever the research looks like that if they go beyond that point, that becomes their world, like the online world becomes their world, and so the expectations of what life and good life and living and all of those things become the online world's expectations of that's what you adopt as your society or your culture. If you're on recreationally on the screen for more than 2 hours a day, that's your world. And so what mom and dad say is secondary, what the school says is secondary, because that's what matters.
The bar is now set.
Yeah, and
if I don't have that shirt, if I don't have that thing,
right.
If I don't have that vacation,
Yeah.
if I don't have that party,
Mm-hmm.
my life's not good enough.
That's right.
And then that becomes the thought in the brain, my life's not good enough. Well, why shouldn't I cut myself? Why shouldn't I use drugs? Why shouldn't I try to get kicked out of school? Well, I'm not good enough. And you just do that over and over and over and over. It's amazing we're still alive as humans, right? Like,
Yeah.
just our resiliency is fighting against the algorithm
That's right.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Okay, great questions. Half of all mental disorders start by age 14, right? So think about that. 50% of them are starting right now. Middle school, right?
Yes.
Middle school, high school? Okay. So what are we looking for, right? We are looking for what I wish I knew was the difference between kid needs to go out and play in the dirt or has something biologically, right, that needs to be addressed. If you go to a psychiatrist, what's a psychiatrist going to do? Give you meds. Okay? Because that's what they do. You go to the podiatrist, he's probably going to put you in a boot. Right? That's the right word, podiatrist, feet, right? Okay. Okay. I got a counseling degree, not. Okay? But so we have to understand as parents, can we encourage our kids' heart? Can we encourage to address them differently? I just want to make sure I have enough. I don't want to bore you with all the details. Okay, 43% of people in SUD treatment for non-medical use of prescription drugs have depression, anxiety, right? So people who come to my treatment centers, it's comorbidity type of stuff, okay? Nearly 1 in 5 Americans have some type of mental condition, $225 billion in 2019. So we're not only diagnosing a lot, we are spending a ton of money. Obamacare kind of opened up Pandora's box for a lot of this, allowing access to, extended the range limit, extended the DSM went from this to this, but then they took out all the stuff that was like really important to culture, i.e. gender stuff. That was part of the DSM switch around in Obamacare. But that's a lot of dollars that could go into beautiful buildings like this, right? But we're spending it on things that we think we should. Okay. Vapes, right? I'm sure everybody else is kind of. I just threw this in there because this is the gateway thing to all things, I think, right now, right? Everybody freaked out that their kid comes home with a vape. They get off the bus, they go to a game, somebody's got one, right? Okay, we know what they are. Okay, I mean it's an apparatus that heats up either nicotine or THC or some other substance, puts it into an aerosol form, and you inhale it. Right? Anybody's ever been in a public place where somebody goes, there's just like this tornado of vape dust in your face, right? So talk to me a little bit about what's your thoughts, what are your fears? Did I put this in here because I was crazy, or I just thought it was, maybe you guys have concerns with it?
Well, the vaping and the pens and all of the things now are so, well, it's not just now, it's been this way for years, but they're so kid-friendly and they're so easily hidden. I mean, I personally think every house should go through every kid thing all the time, because it's just as soon as you kind of take your guard down, there's one in a backpack. It looks like a USB port. It looks like anyway.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere in every shape.
And every place, there's lots of places that sell to kids.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone out and I've watched kids walk in, and I'm like, yep, they're buying. And places don't, and they're not kids that look like 19-year-old boys. These are like, clearly 14.
Yeah.
There's this consensus from kids that it's not as bad as cigarettes, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they're normalizing it, like, it's not that bad, it's fine.
Yeah.
And
they do that with marijuana, and they do that with hydrocodone. I'm not doing fentanyl, right?
It's not cocaine.
Well, it's not cocaine, right? It's meth, but it's not cocaine. Well, at least I'm not freebasing the cocaine.
Right.
I'm just snorting it.
Right.
Right? So when we play that game, there is no end.
Right.
yeah.
There is no end to us being a slave. And that's where I'm going to change it here. I'm just going to, again, my undergrad's in pastoral ministries, so I'm going to go with a little something here. It's our job.
That's right.
Okay? It's our job to fight against the enemy. Nicotine is not the enemy. The vape is not the entity. To fight for our kids' souls and their purpose and their calling, that's our fight. That's our purpose.
Amen.
Right? So when we start, just throw everything else I've said out the door. When we start talking about the thing instead of the thing in their heart, their calling, we've missed it. Okay? Because we've got to draw, our job is not to provide a cool house, not to provide a scholarship, not to provide shoes. School is to provide them the avenue to know Christ. That's it. If we do that one thing, we're done. Mic drop. That's it. Right? We have to trust Him enough to do all the rest. And we're done. Okay? So all the scary facts, all the things of the world, all the vapes that can be hidden from us, if we start talking about those, that's what they want us to talk about. We call that the rope-a-dope treatment. Anybody know that? Okay, it's I wave my hand over here and then punch you right here. Okay, that's what kids do to us. I want to wave my hand over here to distract you so you don't see me really crying out and hurting, having a broken identity, having, just confusion in life. We've all been teenagers. It's terrible, right? It's like all of our other body parts work except for this one, and then this one catches up, and so that. Sorry for the tangent, but that to me is the essence and the crux of why I do what I do every single day, and I think why you're here is because we're trying to shepherd their hearts. We're trying to lead them into their created design and order. Okay, so.
Austin, while you're doing that, I think the other thing that we often try to say is that it's the definition of the good life that is confusing for kids whenever they see, because we all, most of our families, have enough, and all needs are met.
Yeah.
And most wants could be met, and some are meeting all the wants, some are not meeting all the wants, but that for the kids, it's very confusing about what the good life is if you like everything you have is new and nice, and so this looks like the good life, and so that's what I'm after.
Yeah.
Is like we were talking about before, kids are good mimickers, and so they want the good life too. But if the good life isn't above and beyond everything else, Jesus and knowing Him, we all die naked and broke. If they don't understand that above all else, then they will chase something that's a vapor, because you can't find it, you'll never get to it. But that relationship with Christ is the one thing that is the good life, and it's eternal. It's not just here and now, and it's not just being able to give money to a school or to be philanthropic or whatever. But the culture is saying all over, if you've achieved it, then you turn around and you give back, and it's all about here. It's all about today. It's all about
you.
Yeah, right. It's all about you, and you getting yours. Mm-hmm. And but that's not a tangent. It is the core of the message that we're trying to give, that everything competes with it.
Yes, sir.
And also, as we get into these different things, so is the primary driver just trying to find connection, and so that the kids are, hey, you're doing this to connect with you, and then they get hooked into the, hey, this feels good, this is numbing, whatever hurdle there is, or is it?
When I was in middle school, Umbro shorts were cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could catch me dead in a pair of Umbros right now, right? But they were like these short nylon running shorts that were
Cool.
Everybody had them, but me. I had the Walmart version ones.
Right.
Okay? And I felt a certain way about it.
Yeah.
I felt some insecurity about it. I mean, all my friends had them, but me.
Well, yeah.
So,
I had a second-grade girl who was thrilled to get her Stanley mug.
absolutely. Right? $47 later, she has a vessel to drink out of. Right?
She already had one.
Right. But she had to have a purple one because Susie had a purple one. I think it's the same thing. Right? And so that'll slide us into we won't talk about street drugs. They're bad. Don't do drugs. Okay? So I think communication is a key. What I wish I knew is that communication over and 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 over is the key, right? Whether you're with a spouse or whether you're there with a parent or a child, right? Communication is the key. How do you make this relationship work? How do you make the parent-child relationship work? It's with communication, and I think we have to communicate not just parlaying these two things, not just things of the world, but also things of Christ, right? The truths. We have to simply communicate those things to our kiddos and be the metronome. Okay, I don't know if you guys know this, but you control your home. Okay, you are the metronome. You know what a metronome is, right? It keeps pace, it keeps time. And if you're off beat, the metronome yells at you, right? Everybody knows that you're not the one on 120 beats per minute or whatever, okay? So be the metronome in your home. Christ is giving you that authority to do that. How do we do that, okay? As you can tell, I move around a little bit. The only reason why I'm staying center is because there's a camera. But I move around. I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm 6'4", 200 and something pounds. Okay, controlling my reactions is difficult. Okay, somebody says something dumb, I'm gonna like, really? Right? That's what's going on in my head. As an entrepreneur, as a leader, I have to control my reactions. And so as parents, right? Put on your poker face when your kiddo comes home and says whatever, right? Like just fill in the blank. Whenever they want to like shock you or blow your socks off, just put on your poker face. Tell me more. You know? Wow, that must have been exciting for you, right? Whatever, however we're communicating, let's make sure, and I'm preaching to the choir here, is controlling our reactions and not to overreact or to underreact. We want to be right there in the middle to respond appropriately. Number 2, just be a good listener, okay? Again, this thing is killing us, okay? How many times have we tried to sit down and have a conversation and one of us has that thing in our hand? And we're talking about life or death. We're talking about their identity. We're talking about what they're struggling with. It's not just algebra. It's not just science. It's not just baseball. We're talking about their soul. Because all of these things are little bitty, like planks in the foundation that we're putting together so when we send them out into the world, they can go and do awesome things, right? So good eye contact, knee-to-knee kind of stuff, right? Like having a conversation like this, she's really uncomfortable now, right? But if we were to take her pulse now, it just went up because we created intimacy. There's some biological things happening in her that we've got to be good at, right? Good eye contact. Like if I know this person, I'm going to get real close, right? Maybe your kid hates this. Okay? So good listening may be walking side by side, shoulder to shoulder. That was Steve Jobs' deal. He was like, let's go for a walk, right? And here we just walk for miles and miles and miles and miles. So, listening. Don't catastrophize, okay? Somebody comes home with a vape in their pocket, or somebody gets kicked out of, or let's just back it up. Something really simple happens in the cafeteria, right? That you heard, that she heard, that, hey, somebody said that this happened, and oh my God, I'm driving up to the school to talk to Joey. Right? Okay? Because no kid, if we do that, what are they going to do? They're not going to talk to us. Okay? I sure wasn't going to tell my dad anything, right? Because he was in the truck before I had the sentence finished. Okay? Right? Along those lines, like chill out, relax. Everything's not about you. Okay? When we're communicating, be natural. Be natural with your kids. Know your role. Okay? I teach this Eric Burns communication theory. It's a parent, child, and adult. And adult to child. Okay? That's always talking down to them. Child to adult, and then there's adult to adult. There's not a. I don't have time to flesh out the framework. Don't try to be their friend is what I'm saying. Okay? If your daughter comes home and she's like, oh my God, you should have seen what Jane was, well, y'all have uniforms here, right? But it was on the weekend. She was at Six Flags, oh my God, you should have seen what she was wearing. And, you don't jump in as mom and go, oh yeah, her mom dresses that way too. Right? So that's aligning yourself with your kiddo in a very negative way because she's going to replicate that communication and that behavior. Know your role. Know your role as parent. Know your role in communicator. And then offer constructive feedback. Okay? As we're sitting knee to knee, we'll ask, hey, what would you like me, how would you like me to respond to that? Like, kid may freak out if you don't just automatically. How would you like me to give you feedback? Would you like the hard truth? Would you like it soft? Would you like normally, right? Trying to build those expectations in terms of how we communicate. Okay? Questions? Questions on communication. Again, I could do 30 slides just on communication. I've written 14, whatever, it's like this big. We do 14 days of communication skills with our kids and our parents, all curriculum based kind of stuff. So questions? Hard conversations you've had or wanted to have that you don't know how to have?
I need to dash. I guess what I'm thinking about, though, is the fact that the kids are looking not only to your verbal communication, but what you stand for and what you hold important. Obviously, we talk about Christ in this piece. But one of the things that always strikes me is the nature of an adolescent mind and the inability to detect the nuance that an adult can detect. So if one beer is okay for an adult, then why wouldn't that one beer not be okay for a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old? Okay, well, if it's good for a 16-year-old, why not for a 14-year-old? If it's one beer is okay, then why isn't 2 beers okay? If 2 beers is okay, why not 4 beers okay? And so there really isn't this stopping point that develops. And it comes up with vapes a lot. There are parents who are relatively permissive with nicotine, and nicotine is illegal. So if they're okay with this illegal thing, then they must be okay with other illegal things. It's illegal for under 21s, by the way. So that's what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. So alcohol is okay if you're with me. Well, why can't I be 40 feet away and they can't see me?
Right.
Okay. Why can't I be 100 feet away? Why can't I be at Susie's house? So those kinds of mixed messages are very difficult for kids. So I think about communication, it's this, how do you create for kids a clear understanding of where those dividing lines are, because they can't draw those, they very rarely can draw those from themselves consistently. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's where abstinence just comes in, right? And I think, again, we run our homes, and I let my kids build fires in the backyard, in the fireplace. I'm okay with my house burning down, right? Because ultimately that's the worst thing that could happen in my mind, right? I give my kid matches and they go out back, they're going to burn the house down, right? So I have to be okay with that. Now, if I don't want my house to burn down, I have to have some rules and expectations and boundaries. Only in the fireplace, only when dad, kind of like that. But I think when you're talking about substances, our kids can't, we know all the research, right? I mean, a male brain isn't fully developed in 25, 21, 22 for a female, right? So we're simply retarding the neurons in the factory up here if we put substances in it. Sugar, nicotine, THC, opiates, whatever. And so I think how we live out, so there's the nonverbal communication, how we live our lives is super important, like you mentioned, and that's the family norm, right? We don't live in Europe, but the family norm is to have a beer probably in a lot of European countries with 15-year-olds. I don't know. I got friends that do that thing, and it just blows my mind. So I think it's each family, and it's literally playing with fire because you don't know. You don't know. I mean, if your family has, we don't talk about family systems here, but if your family has a tree of alcoholics and substance users, probably not going to let that kid socially drink with anyone, right? And we're going to say, this will burn you. Touch the stove. It is hot. We've already told you. Look at John, Uncle John. Look at Uncle Bill. Look at Uncle Mike. 3 are in prison. 3 for 3. We don't want this to happen to you. Your family tree's different. You got saved. Christ turned you around, set you apart, yada, yada, yada. But we know biologically some of that stuff still comes down the family tree. So that's a whole tangent that we could. Any other questions on that? Did I get it?
Yeah, I think so. We're close. It's the clarity, providing that clarity is really hugely important. I think it's embedded in what you said.
Yeah.
But it's something that we see kids struggle with often.
Yeah. Well, and Frank, like I have a cigar, every once in a while, and my cigars have gotten more frequent, right? And so, do my kids think nicotine's okay? right? So I know I'm taking that risk. I know I'm laying that foundation for them and seeing, or a glass of wine, or whatever, you fill in the blank. What we do is more important than what we say,
Oh, yeah.
always, right? We can be great communicators, but they'll watch every move. They'll watch every move of us. So, okay. Things I wish I knew. Boundaries actually bring us together. When you guys think of the word boundaries, if I was just going to put boundaries up there, what would your first thought or emotion be?
Where I end and you begin.
Okay. Somebody's read Townsend?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Everybody?
Good.
Just finished it again?
Well, right. That's the next slide, okay? Good.
I was just kidding. Thank you. Got any questions?
All right. So anybody have any anxiety or fear about having boundaries with your kid? Right?
I
Yes?
used to think boundaries were walls. And
Okay.
so that was something I had to learn, and that boundaries are good. It's okay to say no.
Boundaries are walls. Boundaries are big, strong, thick. They keep the enemy out, right? They protect me, right? I don't want to get dressed in a room with no walls. That's kind of awkward for my neighbor, right? Or maybe awkward, yeah, right? But I think that's kind of the thought around on parenting. A lot of today is we can't discipline our kids. We can't tell them no. We can't enforce these things, or they'll have bad mental health, or they'll go do drugs. Right? That's the kind of the world I live in, because they'll say, "I'll go kill myself if you make me go to treatment." Right? I'll kill myself if you take away my phone, and they play this game. Right? It may not be that overt with you all, but at some level, that teenager's fighting for autonomy and fighting for living outside of the boundaries. Right? If they're a good, healthy human, that's going to be natural. They're going to fight against mom and dad putting their thumb on them, right? Every good entrepreneurial kid is probably going to push back at all those times. But Proverbs, right? Discipline your children, and they will give you peace, right? They will bring you delights you desire. So, my co-therapist.
Henry Club.
Co-therapist here, right? Boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not me. Boundaries shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership, knowing what I am to own and to take responsibility for gives me freedom. Okay, if I know my yard begins and ends, I am free to do with it what I like. Taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. However, if I do not own my life, my choices and options become very limited. Okay? And so this is for us and this is for our kids. When we talk about the rules and expectations of our home, I like this boundaries word, right? We have our kids, we have an alley, and we say, hey, what are our boundaries? It's 3 houses down. Well, that's because the 12-year-old is on his bike. But if it was just the 8-year-old, it's maybe only 1 house down, right? I don't trust her as much yet, okay? So we have boundaries and expectations of where I end and they begin, vice versa, okay? We want our kids to assimilate this thing into their own life, okay? There's hundreds of them. They're all just like this, right? They are one. They are trying to figure their way in society, trying to figure out where does their best friend, how do I dress? How do I fix my hair? What cologne do I do? What car do I have? What classes do I sign up for? What college do I go to? Versus what am I going to do? Okay? I had the opposite of this problem. I was just like, I don't care. I'm going my own way. I drove to Tennessee and lived there for 8 years and didn't know a single person. Okay, so I had kind of the opposite version of like this blending or codependency or something like that. So what are boundaries? If we had to kind of sum this up, like how do we have good boundaries in a home? How do we enforce when we find a vape? When somebody dates somebody from another school, like one of those bad schools, right? Okay. I don't know what the bad school is, you know.
Let's not say anything.
Okay.
No one feel otherwise.
Yeah. So I went to public school, so it doesn't matter, right? It was Hazel. It was the bad school. Just saying. You went to Hazel?
I did.
Okay. All right.
And so did the spiritual life director.
That's right.
Well,
We could talk.
okay. All right.
Leading him astray.
Yeah. Okay. So, what I want you to kind of walk away out of here, my hope is that you're just empowered. Right? The first 20 slides were just terrible. A bunch of bad data on how the world's falling apart. But the last portion is like, I want you guys to know you're in control. I want you to know that boundaries are good. Like your kid, let's just say he's off the rails, okay? Let's use fitness as example. If I'm 100 pounds overweight, okay? Let's make it really bad. 200 pounds overweight. It's going to be hell to start that journey to back to 200 and something pounds, okay? From 400 to 200 is going to be a nightmare. We've all watched the shows on TLC or whatever it is, right? That's a bad journey. Like if our kids are off the rails with mental health and substance use issues, it begins with simple boundaries to get them back, okay? Number one thing, right? Let them know you're on their side. Love, right? We hear it throughout Scripture. Conquers all sin. You know, God so loved the world. Fill in the blank with Scripture about love. If our kids don't know we love them, are they going to listen to anything? Right? If our behaviors don't show what they think love is, right? They're not going to get it. Right? So when we talk about boundaries, make sure they're kind of with a hug, right? That we're on cue with them. Number two is just have some. I have some rules and requirements. Okay. At our home, we go in here. I'm going to open up this. I don't know if you got any dead bodies in here.
We'll see.
Okay. You open up the pantry, and there's like a list of things you should and should not do for our home. When laundry day is, when this is due, when that's due. We homeschool, so everything is on the paper calendar. It's not digital yet, right? But we have rules and expectations about when things are due, and I communicate this to my parents at our family weekends and things like that. And they're like, oh my God, you write stuff down for your kid and they do it? I'm like, yeah, all the time, right? And so somebody taught me very early on is you can't manage expectations if you haven't first communicated them, right? So we have biblical truths that these are the Davis rituals and the things that we live by. And then we have the Austin things that he's super particular. And if you don't put the fruit on the fruit thing in the refrigerator, I'm going to get real particular, right? There's meat and then there's fruit. They don't like they go in the right spots. Okay? I got her, finally. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, we had some friends who went to family counseling and they were encouraged to come up with a list of rules and a code for their home, their family code, and they did that and we were very close, and so we decided to do that as well. And our oldest had started pushing boundaries and had spoken rules that were thrown out the window, and she didn't think they were serious, and so we ended up coming up with this, and we posted it in our kitchen.
Love it.
Anyone who came over could see it, and it was amazing to see the kids' friends would come over, and they would stand there and read it and say, that's really cool. And the consequences were on there, and they would ask for clarification, what does that mean? And the girls would tell them, and they thought it was really cool that we had that up there for the, it was clear. So, this, you don't do this. If you do, this is what's going to happen.
Fill it out.
Would you take a job without reading the job description?
Exactly.
Would you buy a house without reading the mortgage? Right? We all ask for clarity in every area of our life. Right? But we assume that these little humans just should get it. Right? And I'm guilty. I'm so guilty. Right? I figured everything out on my own. Right? Smartest person in the room. No. Somebody had to teach me to get to the spot that I'm here today. Right? And that's our job. Right? To set those boundaries and expectations with clarity, with definity, with regularity. Does it take once? Gosh, no. Has anybody ever managed employees? Right? Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh. No. Like, it's like a warehouse full of cats, right? So it's regular regurgitation of rules and expectations with love, with truth, and then some consequences, right? So if you don't come to work and perform your job, you get to go stand in line somewhere, or you get to go to the next place, right? Because I don't want you on my team, right? So if you have a rule violation in your house, make sure that you and your spouse are connected, or whoever else is in your home that's authority, connected to that consequence, right? A house divided by itself can't stand, right? So we know we have to have that. And after 19 years of marriage, there has been some differences. I know, okay? That happens in the home, right? Somebody should get a spanking, and somebody should get Starburst. Like, what is it, right? What's the consequence, okay? So having those clear, right, if-then statements makes the world pretty good for our kids, okay? And I think this one's super important. When you have boundaries, have freedom, right? Because you're giving them the ability to choose or reject every single time, right? Because if I'm, again, Enneagram 8, big kid, made my own way in life. If you tell me something to do, am I going to do it? Probably not, right? You guys have a lot of entrepreneurs, coming out of this place, right? So in like biologically inside of each one of them is probably the ability to push against, right? We see that. We see that with the New Testament and the emerging church, right? They weren't dormant. They were entrepreneurial with that. We have a lot of kids that way. I love doing what I do because these kids are like dynamite. They've just been blowing people's hands off instead of coring for diamonds and gold, right, at their intended purpose. And so allowing them to have freedom to do those things is super, super important. Okay, questions so far? This is the last slide. So and there's no slides after that. Okay. This is the last thing. Okay. They're going to be okay. That's it. Simple. Okay? If they know Christ, if you've done your job, right? And that's it. Your job isn't to get them to college. Your job isn't to get them to the things. The things of the world will take care of themselves. Scripture is very, very clear about seeking me first, and my righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Okay? Every mom and dad could be in this room and hear this talk. Because it's mental health and substance abuse, we saw the numbers, right? It's an equal opportunity offender. Nobody is outside of the grasp. Okay? But hear this. They'll be okay. They're resilient little boogers. Okay? It's just like when you held them the first time and their head goes, wah! You're like, almost fell off, but it didn't. Okay? And then they fell on their face after they learned to walk and they skinned their knee. Then they got back up, right? We want to continue to see them fall down and get back up. Fall down and get back up. And we're going to be there. We're gonna have good communication skills. We're gonna have good boundaries and expectations. We're gonna have like family values and rules. We're gonna do all those things. And they're gonna be okay. All right? Questions, thoughts, snide remarks.
How do you think through, so this is, I think, pertains specifically to the family. You know, we're a community here as well, right? And how do you think through, you know, the school sets norms and rules and consequences as well. But as we come together in our grades, you know, we see that work out. How do you think through making similar sort of things with other families? Is that just you intentionally go out there and seek out the families that are doing things similar to you to try to group together and make those positive sort of cliques that are doing good things versus?
Yeah, so we homeschool, right? So, I mean, we have our homeschool families. And we go to Paradox, and we have a lot of kids that go to Covenant. We don't get to hang out with them as much because they do Covenant things, right? And so we hang out with people that do the life like we do. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's super important. That's a lost art in America, right? Because we build our homes as big as we can, and we put giant walls around them and gates, and we wonder why we're lonely, tired, and anxious, and depressed, and just beating against the wind. Because we have nobody to share it with. So I think it's important to find somebody to vacation with, right? To have Sunday supper night with, to whatever, right? We have to do that. Like we have to supplement and bring those families around us, and it's seasonal too, right? Like what happened 7 or 8 years ago, I don't want those people around my kids, right? Like, so now it's a different group of folks that have circled in and circled out. So I think that's huge. That's huge and important, especially if you can curate that here, because you've already got like the metronome set. You've already got this is a feeding or a filter, right? Of the top of the funnel. You've already narrowed down like-minded people. You know, economic status, belief status, probably. You know. So you've got a lot of prerequisites already set.
Yeah. And that part's a probably, we're very clear about that. I think I was trying to be clear about it in the opening. You know, it's not every family, you know, espouses Christ. But every family should feel welcome, you know, because
Absolutely.
it's the body of believers, and so we do want to be hospitable, and our care is for the kids, you know, and obviously families are attached to that, but you know, we want for kids to hear the good news, you know, regularly, because we know it's stressful for families, and there's a lot of things going on, and everybody's distracted. So, you know, can we be a consistent, like you're talking about, a metronome, you know, in the life of the kids, because we do see a lot of families come to Christ through the kids. Like
Absolutely.
That happens here, and I mean, you talk about beautiful. I mean, that's, you know, that's especially sweet. But you know, for Christian families, I think absolutely, like you've got to go find who it is, you know, and make that. It's not just SCS. It's got to be, you know, the family outside of that, and how you're spending your time, and who you're spending it with, you know. One thing you said that I wanted to come back to was, because a lot of times people see the word consequences and they think negative, but that it's equal, you know. And you said it, but just to reiterate the point of those consequences are positive too, you know, and that you know, that leading your kids, leading your family in that way, there and showing them negative consequences of action equally as beneficial, showing positive, you know, consequences of actions too. That you.
Yeah, we know scientifically, right? You lean on the positive every single. A positive affirmation is like tenfold a negative reinforcement.
That's right.
And so every single time we can communicate appropriately and get that positive feedback, I mean, we're reaffirming that, we're building that trust and that rapport for that, right?
Yeah.
Just carry a bunch of Skittles in your pocket.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for parents and their communication with each other, whether they're together or not together or whatever, and how they can kind of, you know, just anything they can do to support their kids as they grow?
how do parents communicate
Yeah.
with words? No, so I think anything that happens, so it's that opening quote, right? You got to know where the conversation is. You got to know where the puck is going to be before you get to the arena, right? So if your kiddo has a vape, I'm going to call my wife and say, we've got a game plan and we got to communicate. We got to review our rules and our family values and the consequences and go in and say, okay, are we okay with like taking his phone and shutting down the car and no baseball for the summer? Or like these are things we already talked about, and we go in together and we got to be united because one of you is going to be weak. Right, that's why he put two together. It kind of makes sense, right? Right. It's not always the wife, it's not always the husband, but one of you is going to have a seizure about it, you know. And so I think having a good helpmate in that is just wise.
To go back to your statistic about kids at 14, most kids at 14 develop their mental disorder by then. Do you find, I know that there's a lot of elements in that, but do you find most of them have developed that through the environment that they have been in within middle school? Like what they've had to deal with, whether it be peer pressure or, lack of confidence or whatever?
There's all kinds of exposures. So you got the biology thing, at 14, that whole puberty thing is just out of whack. And then the exposure to life. I think, right? It's like there's some major milestones in the psychological and biological parts, and I think that's just where they arise. They just happen. Yes, sir?
In talking about drugs to kids, my kids are still young, so obviously, abstinence from all that is the goal. I think the messaging I grew up with, right, was this is your brain on drugs, so it's like, drugs are really bad,
Don't do drugs.
right? But I think the reality is, people do drugs because it actually feels really good, right? And so are there different phases where I need to be more real with the kids about, hey, if you were ever to try this, like, it's gonna feel really good and you're gonna want more of it. Versus, oh no, it's a terrible thing. It's gonna.
Have you talked to him about sex yet?
Not at the the full
Okay.
level, but yes,
So-
we've talked about.
So think about it, right?
Yep.
You don't have that. You skate to where the puck is going to be,
Yeah.
right? So you don't wait till your daughter's walking down the aisle to say, "Oh wait, he's going to do this to you," and then whoa, really? Okay. You had that conversation at 5. Here's your body parts, and you have it at 10, and you have it at 12, and so I think it's in the same way we should be having those conversations. Is we're just educating. Like, being drunk's awesome, but we can laugh, right? Right? Okay, yeah, but should we? No, right? So, yeah, I think that you have to tell them the mechanics of it and the consequences, the boundaries and expectations that come with that. Again, we live in Texas, right? Like, so we have guns, and so it's just like, you pick the analogy, it's gun, right? It has its purpose, it has its function, and if we misuse it, there's bad consequences.
And do you have any thoughts on kind of appropriate milestones or on kind of different levels of those
How old are they?
So 9.5 and 8 right now.
8 and 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just start with family norms. I don't know if there's wine at the house or anything like that, right? But if I would just begin to talk about why we do and why we don't. In some families, it's not talked about, and then when they leave the home, they're like, I'm going to go try everything, right? And so the pendulum was here, and then it swings over here, and you have, sowing their wild oats or whatever. So yeah, I think again, it's just conversation. It's communication. What are the family norms? Because we all have family norms, but we may not talk about them. and the purpose behind them.
Mhm. That's good.
And if we're talking about you've heard the story of like the lady who cuts off the edges of the ham and puts it in the oven, right? It's that thing. It's that little story. It's like, well, it's because the oven wasn't big enough when grandma's little bitty house, right? So it's dumb to cut off 2/3 of the ham when you could cook it all in the same oven, right? So talking about family norms, make it appropriate. Yes, ma'am.
You haven't really talked on this, and I don't know how much, I guess my question is, how much do you feel that this goes into play? But, kind of we live in a society now where we learned a lot about neurodifferences of people, and, most people are forced at certain ages to live in a neurotypical school presentation, and maybe not always conducive for every brain, but how much do you feel a lot of mental health and substance abuse is entangled with neurodiverse brains that aren't really getting proper care or treatment for their situation?
We see a lot of undiagnosed spectrum kind of disorder. Okay, I mean, kid comes in, he's failing at school, he's kind of off the rails, but then you talk to the kid, you're like, oh my God, you got like 120 IQ or something, but doesn't like being around people. We'll just be like, you're fat. It just turned like he didn't understand what was happening here. So I think the answer is yes. There is some of that plays into it that may exacerbate the symptomology or the things, especially in like public school areas and things like that, to where I'm sure you get a lot of individualized care here, but I would assume it's pretty high.
Because that's kind of we're on our third kiddo, he's here, and we've kind of been juggling for the past year, letting him have a little autonomy on, here's the way my brain works. He's known it since he was a little kid.
Yeah.
It's very clear in our house, and it's very genetic.
Yeah.
But, very smart kid, but I know we can't go off in the world with him. So these have to start becoming his own intrinsic decision making.
Yeah.
So we've kind of backed off and kind of came off the train track a lot this year. And that's okay. We have to be, like you said, ready for the good decisions and the bad decisions, the choices we give them. So we weren't necessarily not expecting it, but a lot of people don't like the way certain medications make them feel, although they see the benefits from them. But when they don't, the consequences of understanding, like, why am I leaning towards doing these things now, like substance and so forth. And so making those connections from a parenting standpoint is very tricky, because at some point you have to let them feel their choices.
Yeah.
So it's a slippery slope, I think, but I feel there's a lot of people who don't understand why they have addictive personalities and so forth. And maybe they don't even know they have an addiction, but to whatever things those vices are, it is sometimes utilized to mask other struggles that they're having socially and
100%.
that kind of thing.
10 out of 10 times.
Okay, so you feel it's a pretty good connection to all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, if my brain's on fire and I can't get it to slow down, weed does a good job.
Yes.
Right? But Mom, it makes me feel better. I can concentrate. Yeah. Well, what else could work? What else?
Yeah.
Right? And there could be 100 things. It could be push-ups. It could be, I don't know, right? I mean, it's, I don't know. If we all go without coffee, we're all going to have issues, right? But what else could work?
Yeah.
Something. And so that's what I try to get our kiddos to think is like, okay, yes, it does work, but is it the best for you? And then what else? What can we try some other things? Have you thought about other things? Well, no. Why? Why would I?
It's so easy.
Right. It's so easy. It's right here.
Right.
But the consequences, right? And we have to. Is this long term?
Yeah.
It's great now, but is this going to help me when I'm 40? Am I going to be able to do this when I'm 50? Right. And so that's why I try to look at solutions that are legacy minded. If it doesn't help me in 10 years, then it's going to be bad for me. Right? A glass of wine may be good for me today because of my bad day of work, But can I do that every day for the next 20, 30 years of bad days at work? Maybe not. So
modeling too, as a parent at that point.
yeah.
Is helpful.
Yeah, wrapping around and arm to arm, and say, hey, we're going to go through this together.
Yeah.
We're both going to sit right here and cry and stare at the wall.
Yeah.
Because it sucks for you and it sucks for me, but as the parent, I can kind of be the metronome and set that standard, and then I can sit over here in this chair and he's over here, and then I can scoot away and I can scoot away and I can scoot away, and then finally I'm on the boat and he can have his episode in self-soothe
Yeah.
without drugs.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
You said at the beginning, skating to where the puck is, where it's headed rather than where it is now, and just advice as a leader. I keep talking about cell phones and social media and the tech side of things, because my brain goes to kids have a hard time communicating with peers and with adults, and at a certain point we leave them alone because it's hard to communicate, and I'm like, well, a lot of times they can't communicate because that's where they retreat to, and so the more you retreat to that and don't talk to people, and that you can't look at your grandparents and talk to your grandparents, and it's awkward or whatever, and so you grab mom's phone, and at young ages, right, and is that partially, a cause for the explosion that we see in kids who can't communicate and kids who retreat? They go. It's like this vicious cycle that I'm seeing, and it starts so young, and innocently enough, because it's hard to shop, with a kid who's on you all the time and you can't think. So here's my phone. Like I see that, on a regular basis.
But you know what? My mom did it.
Right.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Yeah, and there weren't, autistic kids everywhere you go all the time, and I don't want to sound insensitive about that, because I see that that's a reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it seems like that wasn't as prevalent, and that there must be some cause, and I'm pointing at that on a regular basis and just saying, hey, let's do this differently. The world has adopted this fully. Let's do this differently. At least for this time. Or let childhood be, an hour physical activity, let it be sleep, and let's keep that manageable. Let's manage that. I feel like that's, skating to where it's going. But I also, you're fighting against the world and the DSM and it's facts, and truth.
Yeah.
And I would use both of those with a little f and a little t.
Yeah.
And so as believers, I feel like we're skating towards something that, the world is skating away from.
Yeah.
That's been since the beginning of time.
Sure.
But it's Easter.
Sure.
Right? It's Easter week. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that was the moment of separation for us.
Right.
To be set apart.
Yeah.
And I think that's the called out ones who we're supposed to be.
That's right.
And, don't be slaves to anything but Christ.
Yeah.
You're right. And so that's just with each one of us,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've got 135 employees in 4 locations. I have to have my phone,
Yeah, sure.
right?
Sure.
Have to have my phone.
Yeah.
But is that really for me? Or is that for them?
Right.
Is that for my anxiety, my worry, my fear, my lack of trust in Him?
Mm-hmm.
Or can I just get an old flip phone, right? And I've toyed with that. Just get a burner phone and see what my life looks like. See what my mental health looks like. See what my body looks like, because I'll spend more time outside.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's what we choose every single day. What we want to model, what we want to do.
Yeah. I kind of accepted the fact that at a certain point, what we're doing and how we're teaching it, there will come a time where the school folds, because there won't be enough people that want that. If we do what we say that we do, if we continue to do that, there will be less and less people who want this. And as I pray about it and think about it, it's okay, because the world will become more and more hostile, the agendas will work, and there is a decreasing number of people who will let their kids come to a place like this, because there's fewer and fewer who want it, and it's like, that God said that would be the case. There will be a remnant at a certain point. And so, it does come down to the individual family. At a certain point, it will be the individual family, because there won't be any schools like this.
That's all we got, man.
Exactly.
That's where we started. That's
Yeah.
where we'll end.
Exactly.
And it doesn't prevent us from doing what is right, even though it may not be culturally popular.
That's right.
We just keep our path.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, I'm encouraged by that, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
because God, he's coming back, and that's the truth, and so, yeah, come on. Yes, come more quickly.
The last slide.
They will be okay.
Yeah.
Do we give him a gift?
Yes, we have a gift for you guys. So, Austin, tell us about your book real briefly.
I read a book. It's, I don't know. It sat on the shelf in the cloud for like 2 years, and it finally got printed like a month ago. And I was like, hey, I'm going to bring you guys a box.
Yep.
So it's just sort of a memoir of, if you really want to be freaked out and like your kids to be awesome, read this book. Because it's kind of all my stories paired to kind of how-to stuff. So what this was just kind of a gloss over. I kind of go into a little bit better detail with some stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much for the interaction.
Would you mind praying over us?
Absolutely.
And after he says amen, y'all want to stick around and talk, you can, but grab a book on your way out.
Please do. God, thank you for today. Just thank you for just the beautiful scenery and people. We ask that you would guide and direct the hearts and the minds and the bodies of everybody here, God. I know they're in the trenches, learning to parent and guide and steward the gift that you've given them, Father. I ask that you would help us surrender that thing back to you, God. I know you've placed them in our care. They're our DNA, but God, somehow show us what surrender looks like, and for you to be the master of their lives, God. We love you. We thank you, Jesus, for your grace and your mercy and your resurrection. Amen.
Amen.